Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today we have special guest, Hough Blane. Hugh is an advisor, speaker, author. His clients refer to him as the Talent Alchemist. His consulting firm, Claris Consulting, is retained by clients such as Marathon Oil, Microsoft, Sony Pictures, Stanford University, Providence Health Systems, Aramark, Space Labs, and Pepperdine University, to name a few. We just had someone on the show yesterday from Pepperdine.
Did you?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of Pepperdine staff. That's awesome. Hugh is an adjunct faculty member at the School of Law and Entrepreneurship at Pepperdine University and has taught business literacy courses to homeless men and women through the Union Rescue Mission in Los Angeles. He also served on the Strategic Planning Committee for the Boys and Girls Club. Hugh has also been a senior consultant with the Tom Peters Company. After 7 years, Hugh recognized that it was time to reinvent himself, and he started Claris Consulting. He is the author of The 7 Principles of Transformational Leadership, Create a Mindset of Passion, Innovation, and Growth, and Mastering the Leadership Mindset. All right, welcome to the show, Hugh.
Pleasure to be here.
Great. So my show is based on my latest best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. And this year, we have globally been hit with just about every situation we could imagine. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to start out with maybe an example you can share with the audience of a time you had to reinvent and reboot your life or your business.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's go back 100 years to 1920, and let's just kind of go back and think about where we are in our current times. In 1920, we still had about another 16 months left of the Spanish flu. Mm-hmm. We had the end of the First World War. We went into a Great Recession. We had the Second World War. We had the Korean War. We had race relations in the 1960s in the Deep South. We had the tumult that was going on in cities all across the nation because of race relations. And then we had the oil embargo of the 1970s. We had the EPA come out because of the environment and how there were some rivers and lakes in the United States that you could set on fire. Mm-hmm. And then we had, the 2008 recession. And if you think about COVID-19 the last 9 months, every single thing that I just mentioned happened in the last 9 months except for war.
Thank goodness.
I mean, these are unprecedented times. So yeah. You asked a really good question. When was the last time? I'm in the middle of it right now. Mm-hmm. So this is not theoretical for me. It's not intellectual. I mean, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had 6 businesses. I buy them, I sell them, I try and grow them. Whatever I need to do, that's, I grow, and that's where I am. Mm-hmm. But 72% of my business over the last 5 years has come from higher education. And so I would be a strategic advisor to the deans and the presidents of universities. Well, mm-hmm. If you don't know this, university budgets have been cut by somewhere around 7.5% to 17.5%. Yeah. So our business took a pretty significant reversal mm-hmm. just this year. And so we had to reinvent ourselves. And so we are in the process of doing that right now. We have worked with technology executives for 25 years. Mm-hmm. We've done a lot of that within higher education. And what we did is we made a pivot to, rather than doing technology consulting within higher education, to doing it within mergers and acquisitions, because that's an opportune place. Right. Because there are so many mergers and acquisitions regarding technology, and mm-hmm. we can help 2 companies streamline the process, have less friction through the acquisition process, and create the investment thesis faster. So that's the shift. We made that, and we're right in the middle of it.
Yes. So that's really important if you're listening in, to be ready and willing to make those kind of transitions. I think that the ones that suffer the most are the ones that want to stay as is when the world has changed so quickly, like you're saying. It's just, you get stuck.
There are a lot of people who are stuck, and I think that they're stuck for a couple of reasons. And if there's anyone listening who is stuck, I think it comes from one of two things. It comes from either fear of the unknown, or fear of letting go of what has made them successful in the past. And so if fear is there, which it should be, if you think about it, there's a lot of uncertainty in the financial markets, even though we've had a couple of good days. There's a lot of uncertainty within just the economy in general. We still don't really know what's going to be happening with COVID. Yes, we got a vaccine that's supposed to be 90% effective, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. But the moment that you're afraid, and it's kind of like if you're crossing the road and you get afraid, and if you freeze, there's a car coming along and it's going to run you over.
Right.
So sorry about the metaphor, but if we get frozen, we're going to get run over. And so that's why sometimes we just need to take just one step, baby step, to get across the road.
So true. And, you know, I remember as a little girl, I was raised a lot by my grandparents, and my grandmother lived through the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, all that. She passed away when she was 103. Dancing at the retirement home, and she broke her hip, and that's what got her. She'd probably still be here today. And I remember the story she would tell me about these things. She was a little girl during the Spanish flu, maybe young teens. And it was just really interesting because I thought that's not possible. We are advanced. We wash our hands. We have science. You know, in my mind as a young girl, I would think, there's no way we could have this again. And here we are. So I think it's so important. Like my young adults, I have 6 kids. My young kids are looking at this. They're now all in college, and they're really caring about history more and about what we can learn from the past for this present moment.
I'll be even so bold as to say this, Sheila, if you think about it, there are a lot of Americans that don't understand history. Now, I'm an immigrant to the United States. I came from Scotland because of a financial reversal, a business reversal that my parents experienced. So my father was born into one of the wealthiest families in Scotland where we lived. My grandfather was an entrepreneur extraordinaire, and he started out his entrepreneurial life by pushing a wooden 4x6 wheelbarrow flat through the streets of Glasgow, and he would put anything on there that he could sell for a profit. And he literally walked up and down the streets and, you know, said, I got lettuce, I got tomatoes, whatever he had. And he then he was opportunistic. He bought a small pickup truck because he said to himself, I can go faster. I don't have to keep on coming back. I'll be more efficient. I can carry more stuff. I can carry heavier stuff. So he ends up buying this truck. And what ends up happening, he becomes really successful. And someone comes to him and says, I want to buy your truck. And he says, no, I'm not selling my truck. This is what made me successful. And then they told him how much they were willing to pay for his truck. And he said, you're the proud new owner of this truck, because he could make more money selling the truck than he would selling the goods and services.
Yes.
So I have to understand that historical context, that my father was born into that wealth because my grandfather ended up having car dealerships and scrap metal businesses. And he just really, he was a rags to riches story. But my dad was the youngest male out of 10. And for your listeners, if they don't understand this, there was a term in the UK at the time called primogeniture, which was that all of the assets were passed down to the eldest son, not to the youngest son. So my father never got mentored, and he never got any money. And so when I was 6 years old, people came to repossess our furniture because things got that bad after my grandfather died.
Wow.
So if I look at that history and don't really understand how it impacted my mom, how it impacted my dad, and how it in turn impacted me, I am doomed to just keep on replaying it over and over again. And that narrative becomes the narrative from which I live, which is everything I have is going to be taken away from me. It's a terrible way to live, but most Americans don't understand the history of what was really going on in 1776, more or less what was going on in 1976.
Right.
And therefore, we just keep on repeating the same old stuff. Sorry, I just went off on a rant.
No, but I get it. And I completely understand. In fact, I remember I opened gift stores when I was 23. And by the time I was 27, I was buying the buildings in California. And I bought 4 other buildings. It was very successful. And I thought, well, I don't have a business degree. I don't really have a degree. I just did, community college, got a little thing, and then started making money. and so I went back to the university to get the degree, and I sat in a class, I think it was an economics class, and they mentioned opportunity cost. And I did a little penciling, and I said, oh my gosh, now that I've paid off like 3 of these buildings, I can rent them out, and I don't have to work 14-hour days running all these businesses, and I'm going to make the same or more over time. And I got everybody that worked for me another job, helped them leave, and and I closed and traveled the world and did other things.
That was a great class.
Yes, that was the best.
Like, I'm going to spend and you think about it, and higher education it's an industry I love. But my question really is, what's going to be the value of a 4-year education? I'm not disparaging it, but one of my clients is Georgia Tech. They have a master's degree program. They teach it 100% online.
Nice.
And it is less than $10,000
for the entire program. And
I
got to write it down. I have college students at Georgia Tech.
At Georgia Tech, and the outcomes of the course are equal to the to the in-person experience. Yeah. So if you don't think that education is going to be radically transformed, then we are totally we're mistaken. And there are some people who should go to college, and there are some that should not, because entrepreneurs can go out and come up with an idea and say, wait a minute, I'm going to start a bookstore. Wait a minute, I'm going to buy the building, and I can have 3 buildings. I had a similar friend, and maybe it's just the work ethic of women. A friend of mine used to work for Microsoft, and she busted her bra straps to use she did everything she could to save as much money. And I asked her once, I said, why are you working so hard? And she said, because I'm going to sell this Microsoft stock, and you know what I'm going to buy? I said, I have no idea. What are you buying? And she said, a mobile home park.
Wow.
I said, why? She said, Hugh, think about it. I have no infrastructure cost. All I've got is concrete slabs. People come and rent them from me. So it's a cash cow. And then she started quoting all of these, and it's got a 7.5% cap rate, and, and it's all cash. And she ended up about 7 years later, I talked to her. She had 5 of these, and they were all just producing a lot of cash for her.
They do.
So, that kind of thing, that kind of work ethic, entrepreneurial spirit, I don't think you're going to learn that in school, but you can refine it and harness it and maybe direct it. But yeah.
Yes, I definitely agree. And it just depends on the person and the personality. I know that I have 2 of my youngest. I have 6 children. I adopted 3. 3 are mine. They're all, college age and above at this point. And 2 of the youngest ones came home because the dorms closed. And they're still not opened up again. So they are doing online school. My daughter got permission to do 18 units because she's bored, and she's one of those kids that can stay really much on track, self-directed. My son struggles because he's not in a classroom, and he needs it's just a different personality. And so he went from like B's to like C's, and he's struggling, and I have to kind of help him a little bit. So it really depends on the personality. Yet the tuition that I'm paying, other than the dorm fees, is the same.
Yeah.
And they're home.
Right. You have a little bit of an issue with that?
Yes, I do. I think and they do too, because they're like, this is kind of crazy. This is like a car, a brand new nice car every year for some of these universities. And if you're home the whole time, they're not getting that, they want to join the teams, and they want to be with the other students. And there's a whole experience that goes along with it that makes it okay. It's a value there, but it's hard. And they're doing Zoom classes, but it's not exactly where it needs to be yet. So there's still some things and maybe this will force the prices to go down and some of the bugs to get worked out.
Maybe so. Some institutions of higher learning are actually also governmental agencies because they're state schools. And I've quipped once, I said the two hardest institutions to try and change culturally are higher education and governmental agencies. You put those two things together and it gets really hard. But let's make this also really practical. I mean, one of the things that I'm doing right now, nobody's going to be able to see this, but over my right shoulder, I have the office in our home. We built my office out when we sold my last company and we came here. And so I have a fireplace, but we haven't ever used the fireplace. So I've ended up putting books in there because all my bookshelves are filled. And I think I've got somewhere maybe around 1,000 books in my office. And there's some over here right on the end.
Right.
And so one of the things that I am doing is I'm saying to myself, what is it that I need to be reading right now in order to have an advantage that other people don't have? And number one for me, it's history. And if for people who do not understand this, now you're in California, I'm in Seattle. So we're on what we call the left coast. We're on the West Coast. Seattle is a pretty liberal place. And, depending on where you are in California, you could say the same thing. My in-laws live in Kennebunkport, Maine. Okay. So for those of you who know this, that's where the Bush compound is. Oh, wow. And so that's the two worlds in which I live. Family are on the East Coast and they are red states. I'm in a blue state. And if you think that what we are experiencing right now with culture and with politics has never happened before, you are sadly mistaken. It has happened numerous times. If you want to go read Teddy Roosevelt, and you can see what he was doing. Right. So I think I'm reading things, and I've got one book in front of me called The Mindful Athlete, and it was written by George Mumford, and he was the mindfulness coach for the Chicago Bulls and for the LA Lakers. And what he's talking about is mindfulness in adversity. When the yogurt is really hitting the fan, how do you remain calm? How do you center yourself? How do you have a mindset that is not, it's not disturbed, that you're calm in that face of adversity? So I'm reading something like that. I'm also reading history, and I'm reading things about science that I wouldn't have read before. So I'm reading more of those things so that I can have a broader view of things. And don't get me started, but I'm not finding any of this on Facebook.
Right.
For those who are getting their news from Facebook, I want to disavow you. That's not news. That's not news.
Even the news is different depending on what station you listen to. It's a little slanted one way or the other way. And
yeah, it is.
I'd love a news station called The Flip Side. I'd like to see both sides, please. And my own choice. So
wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah.
It would. Yes, I totally agree. And it's difficult. I mean, I know having 6 kids, I did lose one. We lost my youngest son to a heart condition in last December. And that was adversity for our family. He had Wolff-Parkinson-White, which is a heart condition from 5th grade. They did ablation. They said, we don't know, he's fine. And he went to grandma's. We were all meeting at the grandparents' home for Christmas, and he didn't wake up. And so that was, how do we as a family handle this adversity? And, we took some time off. I was like, I got a punching bag. If you get upset, we're going to go to grief therapy. We had things, and I think when it's when you're tested that you get to see if all the training and reading and personal development stuff actually kicks in or not. And it really made a difference. Gratitude practice, mindfulness, all those things, retraining the brain when you go to a sad memory to go to something happy so that you don't always get stuck in the sad. And you've met people that you might meet 10 years ago. You meet them today again, you visit with them, and they have the same story. And every time we relive a story that's a tragedy or difficult time, our body goes through we feel it. And it's like we're going through it again at that moment. So there's a lot with the mindfulness. I mean, imagine these sports teams hiring a mindfulness coach.
Yeah, first of all, my condolences to you and your family. How old was your son?
22. good kid, went to school, went to work, had a girlfriend for 4 years, just good kid, solid.
Wow.
Never complained. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I have a friend right now who just turned 50. I think he's 49. And I just found out that he had stage 4 colon cancer. And then all of a sudden there's complications, and, you know, they had to go in and put in a heart stent because of jaundice.
Oh.
And, you know, life is short.
Yes.
There's no guarantee. You and I are we're on this globe that is spinning at something like 1,450 miles an hour, going through a cosmos of 14,000 miles an hour. If you don't wake up in the morning and go, holy Toledo, Batman, today is a gift and I'm going to be in awe of what's going on, then you're missing the boat. Yeah. You know, there's so much to be grateful for. And you mentioned that, the gratitude. And I think that gratitude is a precursor to generosity. If you're going to be generous to the other person, to anyone, to try and make their life a little bit better, I think you have a higher propensity to do that if you are grateful for what you have, as opposed to lamenting all the things that you don't have. I have this personal definition of leadership, which is inspiring greatness in others for others. In other words, that hopefully in some way, shape, manner, or form, I can bring out the very best in you so that you can then bring out the very best in others. And so there's this greatness piece. And I'm grateful anytime I get to have a conversation with someone about that small thing, just even if it's, and you probably know the research then, Sheila, that I think it was Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania, and he wrote a book called Learned Optimism. And what he did is he looked at the research that said that if you just write down 3 things that you're grateful for, or 3 blessings at the end of the day, whether that be, I'm grateful that I have a new pair of running shoes. I'm glad that my dog ate one of the running shoes because, you know, I have a dog, right? And if you write down these 3 things, the incidence for those people who are suicidal, who have actually considered it, the reduction in suicide thoughts is something like 33%.
Yes.
By just doing a gratitude list. Right? So if it takes us 3 minutes, you know, that's the best medicine. 3 minutes, and it will significantly increase my my self-worth, not my self-worth, but my feelings of self-worth.
Yes. And it was hard those first few days, obviously, for everybody to sit. We sat in a circle and we'd all talk about what are we grateful for. And it took a while, but I could see the difference in the brothers, the siblings, in their faces when they went to the gratitude space. And it was like, it just lifted the difficult moment. You know what I mean? It gave like a break, and it really did help step by step to get through that time. And then we got the universal pause, and we were like, my daughter said, if ever we needed a universal pause for our family, it was this year. And then we were grateful for the time we had to be home. And it was like, well, we needed this. Look at that. And so it was how you look at it that makes a difference. It really does.
It's an interesting thing you just said. So how you look at it, right? And I would piggyback on what you just said. I think we're conditioned to see things the way that we see them. I can't remember, and I'm going to butcher this, but there was a Buddhist priest that said, I think he said, we don't see the world as the world is. We see the world as we are.
Yes.
So we see it through our eyes. And so, I mean, I am very fortunate. So if I turn to my left, I am looking at Puget Sound. So I'm 1 block off of Puget Sound. And so the great thing is I get to turn around just any moment of the day and just turn around and say, how cool is that? It's gorgeous. Now, I am also in an office where I've got some original artwork by my sister, and I can look at that and say, you know, and it's, if I don't do that, I slip. I will admit, I slip. And it's really easy for me to start focusing on the negative.
Right.
And if you're in a leadership position, if you're interacting with customers and you allow your brain to go to that negative space, it's impossible for that not to bleed out onto the customer, to the person that is most important to you. So this whole thing about mastering your mindset. I mean, I wrote the special report in 2016, and it was downloaded I think 925 times off of our website.
Uh-huh.
And it just really struck a chord, which is that there are these 9 negative thinking habits that we all have.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how do we correct them? And I still do mindset training with the executives because right now that's more important than ever.
Exactly.
I'm exhausted. I feel beaten down. I'm anxious about what's going to happen. I'm afraid. And I'm trying, and some mothers, Sheila, I had one mother say, I've got 2 kids that were homeschooling. And it's not that we wanted to homeschool them, but we're forced to.
Yep.
And because the schools closed down and I'm still trying to do my job. And her word for describing how she felt was one word. And she said, broken. And I went, oh, broken. And she was heartbroken. Her spirit was broken. And you could just tell. And so it was disheartening. But there is a lot of that. And people don't want to discuss that.
Exactly. One thing I did want to share, I don't know if you've heard about this, but in the United States and in Canada, there is something, if you're listening in and you've hit a spot where you're having a really tough time mentally, or maybe you've lost your health insurance and you need help with that, or you need resources, any kind of resource, you go to 211, you can dial it, or you can Google 211 and your state or province. And with that, you will find a bunch of resources, how to get food on the table if you're short on cash this month, or help with getting a job, all these different things. And the secret is nobody knows about that secret. I've surveyed about 60% of the people have never needed it. So they're not aware of this resource. And maybe, hopefully, you're listening and you never need it. But if you hear somebody, maybe it's a friend, somebody, posted at work, somebody sees that, and maybe they're not going to talk about what's going on at home, but they'll call that resource number.
That's great.
That will help.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yes. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing and how you're working with people right now, as far as with the mindset and all that you're doing.
So I'm an executive coach. So there's really 3 people that we serve. We actually serve entrepreneurs because that's kind of my space. I've been in entrepreneurship, and those are typically people who are in the $50 to $200 million range. And then there are executives in mid-market companies, and that's typically over 100 million up to like $1 billion. And then there's some investors that we work with that when they acquire a company and they want to make sure that they get the return on investment they want. And so I work in 3 areas primarily, which is how do you elevate the leadership skills to elevate the business results? And there, you can see people who are really talented. They have technical expertise, but they don't have the relationship or people skills to really drive the business forward. And we help with that. Nice. And we also help in the areas with, teams. Oftentimes what we have is a lot of committees. We don't really have teams. And, there are people who have different compensation structures. And so they come and they say, we're going to be a team, but it's really not a one for all kind of thing. So we're really in that space of how do you create high performance teams? And that third space is really how do you shift the thinking from playing not to lose to playing to win mentally?
Yes.
And so that's the space where I'm going to say that maybe the third thing that we help people with, that third thing, so dramatically increases the first and the second. And so I give you an example. I was speaking with one of my new coaching clients, and it's a mindset thing. So I'm just going to say this. I didn't like him at first, but my client calls me and says, listen, he's either going to be here or he's not. I'm willing to make the investment. So if you want to work with him, I'd love it, because if he can't work with you, then he's going to be gone in 6 months. I'm like, I don't like that kind of work, Sheila, because it's like, I don't want to get involved in a lawsuit somewhere down the line of somebody. But I said, let me talk to him and let me find out if he's even open to change. And everything that I said to him, there was always a yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. And so he was excusing his behavior. And I finally said to him, I said, I've never said this to a client before, but I'm going to let you know, I don't really like you. And I don't think that we should work together, because every time I say something, I'm feeling like you're trying to dismiss me and trying to make sure that you're smarter than me. And I just don't think that's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this pause. And he said, you know that you're the second person that's told me that today?
Oh.
I said, oh, yeah? Who was the first person? And he mentioned a woman's name.
Uh-huh.
And I said, and who's that? And he said, it's my girlfriend. I said, oh.
Mm-hmm.
She said the same thing? And he said, yeah. I said, how's that working for you? And that was the moment when he said, I need to go away and think about this. So he went away and thought about it and came back and said, I'm not going to tolerate me showing up that way. So we just worked on his ability, pardon me, to kind of see a situation and choose a different response.
Mm-hmm.
And his responses were so habitual that there was something in the dark recesses of his experience that said, I've always got to prove that I'm right. And he was doing it with the people that mattered most to him. And so we just created a few exercises that allowed him to disengage emotionally and to just see it in neutral terms and then make a different choice. So I'm not a therapist, but what I am is the work that I do is therapeutic, right? Because I'm a behaviorist. I can look at something and say, is that working? Let's figure out what the trigger is. Let's pull that apart. Let's create a new trigger. Let's create a new habit. Let's create a new ritual. And if you do that, then when this happens, you do this. And if we hardwire that, then they change their behavior. And my contention is if you change your behavior, you get a different result. Am I answering your question?
I love that. Well, yes. And that's very helpful for those listening in. We all have that friend or coworker or employee that kind of goes there and they're asking for help. And then they want you to give them ideas and everything you say is no, I can't do that. Right. Or whatever. And it's like, well, why do you even talk to us? What can we do? And there's something about personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. When you learn to take personal responsibility for what you can control and change in your life, then you own it.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When you give, oh, it's that person's fault, I can't because, and it's always an excuse, you're not taking responsibility. So everything owns you and is in control of your life and your outcomes.
So here's what I'd say in piggybacking on that, because I agree 100% with that. I would then ask your audience this. If you resonated with that, when I said, yeah, and there's people who always then kind of refute something and this, that, and the other, what would it be like if they stopped for a moment and said, I wonder if there's anyone that I either work with, live with, or do business with that would say that about me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So rather than automatically just pointing and saying, oh yeah, I know 3 people like that.
Right.
What would they do if they said, wait a minute, I wonder if I ever do that.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how you'll know. Do you ever find people resisting your ideas? Do you ever find people that just kind of go, no? And it may not necessarily be that they're resistant, but it may be that your delivery to them, maybe, I'm not saying it is, mm-hmm. but your delivery could be coming across that you're communicating in a way that doesn't work for them, which means that they'll reject it. So, I think that there's 2 things we ask. What is it that I could do to deliver this message in a way that the person can hear it? That's number 1. Number 2, if I'm not doing that, what is it that I need to do as opposed to how does the other person need to change?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and we can't really change anyone. We're all change ourselves, really. I mean, there's some people or clients even that really aren't aligned. Like you don't want every single client maybe for your company. You mentioned all the clients that you work with.
Mm-hmm.
They have to align with what you're able to work with. So some people can disqualify, like you said, I can't work with you to that one guy because it wasn't working out. So you're really honest about it. So there are some people or businesses that may not have the values that you have or the work ethic or something that's, it's not going to work. And you're like, well, it's not going to work. Here you go. and you save a lot. I don't know. I think it's about 80%. It's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you want to have 80% of the clients be the ones that really fit.
Yeah,
And
that are in your 20% of your expertise, and that just make you come alive.
yes.
Yeah, right. There's
so much easier.
And I had a conversation. So the guy who actually promoted 80/20 the most was a guy by the name of Richard Koch, Koch, and I've got all 6 of his books, or no, I've got 8 of his books. So I'm an 80/20 guy. And for those of your listeners who don't really understand it, is that 80% of your results, whatever you're doing, 80% of them come from 20% of the activities. And that you can actually look at 80% of the carpets, 20% of the carpets in your house get 80% of the wear. 20% of the clothes in your closet you wear 80% of the time. If you look at a professional football team, 20% of the players get 80% of the payroll. 80/20 is everywhere. In 2019, 97% of the S&P 500 came from 3% of the stocks. It's always disproportionate. And so one of the things that I help my clients do is to say, let's identify that 20% of your activities that produce that disproportionate result. And let's be clear, that other 80%, you may not be able to toss it out the window, but over time you can convert that 80% to the 20%. And here's the thing that people don't understand. That's a 16 times greater effectiveness when you go from the ineffective 80% to that effective 20%. It's 16 times more effective to do that. And if you live your life that way, then you are 16 times happier, you're 16 times more productive, you're 16 times more successful. And it's a brilliant methodology that Richard articulated. It's always been there, but he's really articulated it.
Oh, yes. I read all that. And when I first heard about this 80/20, I was like, whoa. And I started looking at everything I did in my life, and I was like, holy smokes, this is incredible. I loved it. And it really is true. I had to kind of reinvent my life and say, wait a minute, I need to make sure that I'm spending 80% of my time on what really is making the results. And for instance, writing a book, it takes a minute. Things like that I've recently done, it takes time. Raising 6 children. So I've had to say no to maybe things that, yeah, that sounds fun. That sounds great. I'd like to go contribute to this and that, or be at every event. And I had to decide which ones mattered most to myself or to my children, and what I had to say no to because of my bigger yes to the percentage that's working. And it really shifted everything.
That's great. That's great. Good for you. That's great.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. So now how can people work with you or connect with you more to learn more about all you're doing?
Probably the first place, just go to my website, www.claris, which is with CLARIS consulting.net. Hugh at clarisconsulting.net. And you can read about, the ways that we work with people, strategic advisor, executive coach, learning experiences and whatnot, and speaking. And, that's probably the best way.
Okay, that's great. And do you have any last minute tips for those listening in that are maybe just becoming an entrepreneur or reinventing their business, and they're starting to lead a small team or group?
Yeah. For the first time?
Yeah, or first time on their own as an entrepreneur versus for a company. There's a lot of that going on right now.
So yeah, if you were an employee and you're now a 1099 and you're now going out on your own, you're going to be a quote unquote entrepreneur. Let's put that in parentheses. Let me suggest to you that being an entrepreneur is probably 80% marketing, 80% marketing and sales, and 20% technical expertise. If you are good technically, and I'm saying that whatever you're going to do, if you're going to open up a window washing business, if you're good at that, that's all fine and well, but you have to sell it. And so 80% of what you do has to be devoted to selling and to marketing. And a lot of people they don't like to sell. They don't like to walk up to somebody and say, I can really help you with your windows, and here's how, and this is what the fee is. And they don't know how to sell. So the first thing I would do is I would say, just recognize that right up front. Number two, I would say, don't go into anything for the money. The money is a terrible barometer. I've done it, and it can make life miserable because you're chasing money as opposed to attracting money. And you attract money, and I think by doing three things. You attract it by loving deeply, learning daily, and living boldly. And here's what I mean. If you love a customer, if you really love them, not just like them, then what you're going to do is you're going to try and figure out desperately how to serve them and how to make their life better. You will spend so much time learning how to do that because you're just hyper-focused on them.
Yes.
It's kind of like a relationship that you're in with a person and you like them, and it's almost like you tolerate them. Well, someone who you love, and I'm not talking about a romantic love, I'm talking about like the agape type of love.
Yes.
You will just say, listen, I want your life to be better. And so I'm going to learn how I can do that better every single day. And then once I've learned something, I deploy it. I live boldly. That means I'm experimenting. I'm going out into the world. I'm trying something. I got a bias for action. And if you can love a customer, love an employee, love something about your work, and you learn about it every single day, and then you boldly go out and do it, I think that that's what's going to help make you successful.
Definitely. That's beautiful. All right. And just one more time, could you share the website one more time for the audience?
Sure. www.claris, CLARIS, consulting.net.
All right. Thank you again for being a guest on the show. And we will be back after these